Good morning again. So the Laundromat project, we've been around since 2005, and our mission is to amplify the creativity that already exists in the communities in which we work. Really seeing artists and community members as two sides of one coin, which I'll talk about a little bit. We work across New York City primarily, and in fact, in the last year have decided to anchor ourselves in three neighborhoods in the city. One is Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn. Another is Hunts Point, which is in the South Bronx. And the third is Harlem in Manhattan. So all of these, for different reasons, very iconic neighborhoods, ones with incredibly rich histories, both locally but also kind of outside even that very specific sphere. Each of them has challenges that the folks in those neighborhoods are really kind of grappling with, be it access to food issues and things like that in Hunts Point, or notions of change and very much about displacement issues and gentrification issues happening in Harlem and in Bed-Stuy particularly, and issues of equity and education, et cetera. But they're also places that have these incredibly rich histories. So salsa and hip hop in the Bronx and South Bronx, and you have, the Apollo and Studio Museum and the history of kind of Black culture, in particular in Bed-Stuy or in Harlem, and hip hop, et cetera. So in all of these neighborhoods, there's these cultural assets that exist that we really try and start our conversation there. So let's see, we bring art and artists into neighborhood spaces, including laundromats and other kinds of such spaces. We're really interested in meeting people where they are and also expanding our notion of what that means. So originally, I did want to say I'm going to end this with a 5-minute video that takes you into a particular artist's project, because I really felt like it was important for you to hear something from the artists we work with and kind of what that arc looks like for them. All of our work is very much grounded in these principles, these 7 principles. So we really think of ourselves as being, creative catalysts, people who are neighborly actually meaning, kind of the sense of being a good neighbor, connecting to the people that we work with, being active listeners and learners. There's a lot of learning that happens in this work, and I'm excited to hear about that from fellow panelists, and being open to that and being able to pivot is important. We actually defined these relatively recently, and one that really kind of kept coming to the top as we were talking to board members and artists and other folks who care about the Laundromat project was this idea of being propelled by love, and that being very much how we ground our work. So I actually like to kind of start these by just kind of mentioning that these really exist in a very real form for us and are very much a touchstone for us about what are we doing and how does it connect to these 7 ideas and principles or values. So I mentioned that we think of ourselves as working on 2 sides of one coin, and on one side of that is the idea of working with artists and really recognizing artists as community assets, and often underutilized community assets. So we have a program in which we resource artists. We commission them to make projects in laundromats, and they varied from portrait studios to, this is a most recent class, portrait studios to yoga studios to a mini film festival we had this summer in a laundromat in Harlem. We also do and that's a 6-month residency. We also, every summer, also during that period, we work with artists who are professional development fellows. So artists who are interested in doing work that is socially relevant and socially engaged. And so this is the most recent class, which had 3 residents who had residencies in laundromats and 15 artists who were, our fellows, our professional development fellows. And we also had interns and staff. Like, the idea is really to seed creativity among a number of us. And really that idea of kind of farming things out or pushing things out into the world. And our fellows are learning everything from cultural organizing to how to sustain their work both as people, like really their own energy levels, as artists, how do you do that and how do you keep going? And also how do you actually sustain, get grants and other kinds of resources you need? How do you communicate about the work you're doing? How do you build real community partnerships that feel effective and respectful for everyone involved? So those are some of the kinds of courses they go through over that 6 months. On the other side, we really think about community members as very important parts of what makes a neighborhood thrive. So we're working at the neighborhood level across the city. So we have these 3 very different neighborhoods. And believing that each of us has creative capacity and that the only way we're going to thrive as neighborhoods is to actually pull that up. We don't all have to identify as artists, but having our own creativity recognized and valued and able to point it towards the challenges that we feel we're facing in our own neighborhood. So we work with teaching artists, we have drop-in art classes in and around laundromats, we're beginning to do after-school programs, in-school programs, and festivals, et cetera. So kind of figuring out how do we connect the artists we're working with as community assets and pull up the creative capacity of kind of everyday folk and mix those together is kind of what we're really trying to do. One of the ways, I'll just touch on this very briefly, that we started to think about this and do this even through a program is this late summer or early fall, September, we had a day we called Field Day, in which we basically had a festival of neighborhoods across our 3 neighborhoods, highlighting all the work we were doing in our residencies as well as our kind of drop-in arts education classes, but also in moving theory to practice with our professional development fellows. They actually came up with different cultural activities in each of those 3 neighborhoods that were specific to those neighborhoods. So a cultural feast, kind of looking at issues of food and culture in Hunts Point. This is a photo from Harlem where they did a series of pop-up stories and performances along 15 blocks of Lenox Avenue, which is Malcolm X Boulevard, a major boulevard in Harlem, and also moments of actual spontaneous community conversations that happen along this 15-block period. So that about 40 or 50 people kind of went on that walk. So here's just a quick photo. And as I promised, I really wanted to give a moment. This is just kind of an overview. We'll have plenty of time to go into deeper discussion about all of this as well as everyone else's, but wanted to give you the voice of one of our artists. So let's see. Where did that go? Yes. That is not So this is Aisha, this summer's project.
The Laundromat Projects, 2013 Create Change Public Artist in Residence for Bed-Stuy. My project is called Mapping Soulville, and as a reporter friend of mine once said, in Mapping Soulville, street signs become a map to the soul, which I thought was a beautiful way of summing it up in like 8 words. Yeah, I think it's like in some ways it's kind of like about making yourself at home, and like thinking about how these public things like street signs can be a reflection of the people who live here. We have this thing already in the neighborhood where a lot of the street signs have been renamed after Black historical figures, which I grew up with and I always liked it. And so it just kind of expands on that by asking people to, I guess, like think about the street signs as a tool for like becoming a reflection of the people who live in the neighborhood. Just a reactionary kind of thing, and I try not to dwell on that. Because I don't like to do reactionary projects, but my mom had told me that she heard a group was petitioning to take Malcolm X off the street sign, and it ticked me off because I saw it as like connected to this wave of gentrification that we've been dealing with. And my thought was kind of like, what if you want to take an inch, I'm going to push back a mile, like, and that was, so my immediate thought was like, if somebody wants to try to take Malcolm X off the street because they don't feel like it should be a neighborhood where Black folks can make themselves at home, then why not make a project where Black folks can really make themselves at home? That was part of it. And then the other part of it was the school down the street. There's a school on Malcolm X Boulevard that's named after Malcolm X, but it's named differently. It's named El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz. And it's always been there, and I kind of didn't, I just thought it was weird that they used a really long name. But then one day, it just hit me that El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz is not the same as Malcolm X. They're actually different people. You know, it's the same person, but he's like in a very different phase of his life. That's a big deal. And I started thinking about, you know, like Malcolm X, having a Malcolm X Boulevard is saying one thing, but what if it crossed, you know, a road named El Hajj Malik El Shabazz Road, and what that would be like to live with that. And I thought it would be a really beautiful public work of art. What I'm realizing is that laundromats kind of have like subway etiquette, which means that like there's a ton of people who come in and out of a laundromat, but it's kind of like, it's weird if you just turn and start talking to a person next to you at a laundromat. It's not like that's not the etiquette of laundromats. And so as I was like setting up and installing things, I realized that the project itself actually is kind of like the thing that will start to connect people who normally come here, or like gives people an excuse to talk to each other. And coming in with ready-made street sign names like that, Detroit Red, Malcolm X, El Hajj, it's not a good community project because it's telling people like, oh, this is what it should be. And so I kept the idea of thinking of Malcolm X Boulevard as a timeline of his life, but just got rid of my ideas of what the street name should be. And then just made it a project where it's just asking people what they think it should be, if it was going to tell the story of his life. I like to do things that are time and site specific, but in terms of something that people in another part of the country might do if they were doing Mapping Soulville, I tried to rewrite it, or I've been rewriting it as I'm going, so that it becomes something where you can take like the core part of it, that idea of like making yourself at home, and just translate it to wherever you are. I think what's beautiful about having projects where artists work in their own neighborhoods is, you know, it also changes your perspective on your own neighborhood as an artist. I'm meeting a lot of new people. I'm getting to know people that I kind of knew a lot better, or people that I already knew in ways that I didn't. And like the history I've been learning about the street is really interesting. Just because, like, you know, like if you don't have, how can I put it? You know, you have to know to ask the question in the first place to get somebody to tell you the story. And so if you've never like been thinking about the subject, people could know all kinds of information, but they've never told you before because you never asked, you were never talking about that before, you know. So I'm learning all these things, which is great.
Thank you.